The 1970s felt like a time with no seatbelts on life itself. Rules were loose, risks were ignored, and everyday behavior crossed lines that would never be tolerated now. People laughed, shrugged, and carried on while danger hid in plain sight. Toys shattered, smoke filled the air, and authority looked the other way. What once felt normal would now trigger fines, outrage, or arrest. This video opens a strange time capsule, where freedom often meant recklessness. As we revisit these moments, ask yourself one question: were people braver back then, or simply unaware of what they were risking then today? In the early 1970s, danger often wore a smile. Adults trusted objects and habits that would terrify us now. One of the strangest was a small toy called clackers. It looked harmless. Two hard plastic balls hung from a string, tapping together with a sharp, rhythmic sound. On playgrounds, that sound meant status. If you could keep them swinging fast, you were admired. Children snapped their wrists for minutes at a time, pushing speed higher and higher. The noise echoed through schoolyards like a tiny machine losing control. What no one mentioned was the pressure building inside those plastic balls. Made from brittle acrylic, they heated up with every strike. Eventually, they exploded. When clackers shattered, they did not crack politely. They burst. Sharp fragments flew outward without warning. Hands were cut. Arms bruised. Some children were struck in the face. In rare cases, pieces hit eyes and caused serious injury. Teachers panicked. Parents complained. Hospitals took notes. For a short time, banning clackers felt impossible. They were too popular. Stores sold them by the thousands. But reports kept coming. Injuries piled up. The same toy that taught rhythm and patience was now seen as a threat. By the mid-1970s, clackers vanished from many shelves. Schools outlawed them. Manufacturers were forced to stop production. Today, selling a toy designed to shatter near a child's face would be unthinkable. Clackers remain a perfect symbol of the decade. Fun came first. Consequences arrived later. In the 1970s, learning the hard way was simply part of growing up. It was a world where warnings were rare, trust was blind, and survival often depended on luck rather than caution or protection, leaving behind memories that feel funny today, but quietly reveal how close ordinary play came to real harm for many children everywhere. By the 1970s, smoking was not a habit, it was a background detail of daily life. Smoke drifted through offices, classrooms, hospitals, and even airplanes. Lighting a cigarette indoors didn't feel rebellious. It felt polite. Ashtrays sat on desks like standard equipment, and no one asked permission. Airplane cabins were the clearest example. Passengers boarded, fastened their seatbelts, and lit up within minutes. Smoke curled through narrow aisles, trapped in recycled air. Children breathed it. Flight attendants worked entire shifts inside thick clouds. Even the cockpit wasn't spared. At the time, the danger was brushed aside. Cigarettes were advertised as calming, stylish, even healthy. Warnings were small and easy to ignore. If someone complained, they were told to move seats, not question the smoke itself. But the damage was quietly accumulating. Non-smokers developed chronic coughs. Crew members reported headaches and breathing problems. Studies began linking secondhand smoke to serious illness. What once felt normal started to look negligent. The shift was slow and uncomfortable. Airlines resisted. Tobacco companies pushed back. Passengers argued. But evidence kept stacking up and public patience thinned. By the late 1980s and 1990s, smoking sections began to disappear. Eventually, smoking on commercial flights was banned entirely. Today, the idea feels absurd. A single lit cigarette on a plane would cause panic, fines, and possible arrest. Smoke detectors, air systems, and strict laws make it unthinkable. Yet in the 1970s, this was routine. Thousands of flights took off each day filled with smoke and silence. No alarms. No outrage. Just shared air and shared risk. It's a reminder of how slowly danger becomes obvious. What people once accepted as harmless comfort is now recognized as a serious threat. The past didn't feel unsafe while it was happening. That realization only came later, when the damage could no longer be ignored and the air finally began to clear. During the third stage of this forgotten meal's history, families relied on routine, preparing it at dusk when hunger felt heavier than hope, and supper became an act of endurance. The ingredients were rarely chosen for flavor. They were chosen because they lasted. Pantries held sacks, jars, and tins that could survive months of waiting without spoiling. Cooking followed memory instead of measurements. Hands learned the texture, the smell, and the sound, because written recipes were luxuries many kitchens did not own. The dish filled the room with a plain, familiar scent. It did not promise comfort, but it promised survival, which mattered more during years shaped by uncertainty. Children learned patience at the table. Portions were small, seconds were rare, and silence often replaced conversation as everyone focused on finishing what was given. Leftovers were never wasted. The same meal returned the next morning, thinner, stretched with water, or reshaped to appear new, even when nothing truly changed. This food carried no celebration. It appeared on ordinary days, week after week, marking time more reliably than calendars hanging on cracked kitchen walls. Neighbors shared advice, not ingredients. Tips traveled quietly, whispered over fences about how to thicken it, warm it longer, or make it feel less empty. The recipe became a habit passed down without praise. It survived because it worked, not because anyone loved it or spoke proudly about its place on the table. By the end of this period, the meal stood as proof of resilience, showing how families endured long seasons of scarcity with patience, discipline, and an unspoken promise to keep going. As time moved forward, this meal quietly adapted to changing circumstances, though its purpose remained unchanged. It continued to exist not as a choice, but as a necessity shaped by limited options and long habits. By this stage, families no longer questioned its presence. It appeared on the table with the same predictability as nightfall, signaling another day endured rather than enjoyed. The cooking process became faster. Fuel was conserved, and kitchens grew efficient through repetition. Pots were reused, and heat was carefully managed to stretch both ingredients and resources. Adults understood the unspoken rules. Nothing extra was added unless it could be spared. Even salt was measured with restraint, saved for moments when morale needed lifting. Children grew accustomed to the taste. For them, it became normal, forming early memories tied to hunger, routine, and quiet evenings spent indoors. Community conditions influenced the dish's form. When supplies ran thinner, it became watery. When circumstances improved slightly, it grew thicker, though never rich. The meal was often eaten without ceremony. Plates were simple, sometimes mismatched, and tables showed wear from years of use. Still, everyone sat together. This food carried stories without words. It reflected the strain of the era, the patience of those who prepared it, and the discipline of those who accepted it. Over time, the recipe stopped being written down at all. It lived only through practice, passed between generations through observation rather than instruction. By the end of this chapter, the dish had become part of daily life, blending into memory so completely that its origins began to fade, even as its presence remained constant. In the 1970s, children often rode in cars without any real protection. Seatbelts existed, but many families ignored them. Kids stood on front seats, leaned out of windows, or sprawled across the back like luggage. Parents focused on the road, not the risk behind them. At the time, this felt ordinary, even harmless. Car interiors became playgrounds. Sudden stops sent bodies sliding, yet laughter followed instead of concern. Accidents were treated as bad luck, not preventable mistakes. The idea that a child needed special restraints had not fully taken hold. Safety warnings were easy to dismiss when danger was invisible. Pickup trucks told an even stranger story. Children piled into open beds, holding onto the sides as the vehicle bounced down roads. Hair whipped in the wind, and freedom felt thrilling. No one imagined that this carefree ride would later be seen as a serious violation of the law. Smoking inside cars added another layer of risk. Windows stayed closed and smoke filled the space. Children breathed it in without question, unaware of long-term effects. What now feels shocking was once part of daily travel. Road trips lasted hours, sometimes days. Rest stops were rare, and rules were loose. Adults believed toughness built character. Discomfort was not avoided, it was accepted. Looking back, these moments reveal a mindset shaped by trust and habit rather than caution. Danger did not announce itself. It blended into routine, disguised as normal life. Today, these actions would bring fines or intervention. In the 1970s, they passed unnoticed, carried forward by a belief that life simply worked this way. And that belief, more than the behavior itself, is what truly vanished with time. In the 1970s, air travel was a mix of glamour, absurdity, and rules we would find shocking today. Smoking was everywhere, cigarettes filled the cabin, and ashtrays were built into every armrest. Flight attendants, or stewardesses as they were called, handed out free cigarettes with a smile. Passengers inhaled clouds of smoke at 30,000 feet without a second thought. Infants, asthmatics, and anyone who disliked smoke had no escape. The experience was normalized, the risks invisible. Lawsuits and growing scientific evidence eventually forced airlines to rethink, but for a time, smoking on planes was just part of the luxury. Job requirements for flight attendants were equally surreal. Women were chosen for looks, required to maintain strict height and weight limits, and often had to remain unmarried. Pregnancy could cost you your job. Their uniforms, mini skirts, go-go boots, were less about professionalism and more about entertainment. Airlines sold glamour as a brand. Passengers expected it, and society complied without question. Over time, legal challenges and feminist activism changed the rules. Flight attendants gained rights, uniforms became practical, and the focus shifted from appearance to safety and skill. Even food and drink were radically different. Vending machines with cigarettes and alcohol were common, accessible to anyone. No ID checks, no age limits, just convenience. Teens could walk in, drop coins, and get what was once considered an adult privilege. Smoking and drinking were normalized in homes, workplaces, and even schools. Babysitters were left with complete access to everything: sodas, liquor, and cigarettes. Teens were trusted to supervise children with zero oversight. These freedoms, reckless by today's standards, shaped the era. They reveal a society experimenting with independence, where adults and teens alike navigated blurred lines of safety and fun. Looking back, it seems absurd and dangerous, but it was the reality of the time. Rules were few, risks were high, and the thrill was undeniable. Life in the 70s wasn't just lived, it was tested, daringly and without apology. In the 1970s, diet culture had a strange edge, often fueled by dangerous shortcuts. Amphetamine diet pills were the quick fix everyone talked about. Housewives, working women, and even teenagers were targeted by glossy magazine ads promising rapid weight loss, increased energy, and unstoppable productivity. The pills were advertised as normal, safe, even empowering, hiding a secret. They contained legal amphetamines, essentially speed. Users would feel jittery, anxious, sometimes euphoric, and far from hungry. The side effects were severe: insomnia, mood swings, heart problems. But the promise of a perfect body outweighed the warnings for many. Doctors even prescribed these stimulants as routine. Lead-based paint was another silent danger of the era. Homes, schools, toys, and even lunchboxes were coated in vibrant colors made with lead. Toddlers chewed, scratched, and licked surfaces, unknowingly consuming a neurotoxin. Developmental delays, behavioral issues and lifelong cognitive damage went largely unnoticed until studies and regulations finally caught up. In 1978, lead paint was officially banned in homes and children's products, but for generations, exposure had already left its mark. Even school discipline reflected a different mindset. Corporal punishment was standard. Wooden paddles, rulers, and spankings were routine tools for teachers. Public paddling sessions weren't uncommon, and parents often supported it. Spare the rod, spoil the child was a guiding philosophy. But psychologists began to reveal the long-term emotional toll on children: fear, obsession, and anxiety around learning. By the late 1980s, most states banned corporal punishment, emphasizing education over pain. These examples show a society flirting with danger, often blind to consequences. Pills, paint, paddles. They all reveal an era of experimentation and casual risk. What seemed normal then now feels reckless, even shocking. The 70s embraced freedom, innovation, and rebellion, but sometimes at the expense of safety. Looking back, it's hard not to marvel at how much was permitted and how easily it shaped a generation's memory. The 1970s were a golden era for brands that promised both style and comfort, but not all of them survived the changing times. Oldsmobile was a symbol of middle-class pride and reliability. From the Cutlass to the Tornado, these cars filled driveways and parking lots across America. They were sturdy, classic, and every uncle or dad trusted them. Driving an Oldsmobile meant status, stability, and a sense of confidence. Families relied on them for road trips, graduations, and daily commutes. But by the late 1970s, competition from Japanese manufacturers brought sharper design, better efficiency, and advanced technology that American automakers struggled to match. Oldsmobile tried to adapt, introducing sporty versions, luxury trims, and modern updates, but it was never enough. The brand couldn't find its identity between innovation and tradition. Slowly, sales declined. Dealers lost confidence. By the 1990s, Oldsmobile felt outdated, a relic of a bygone era. And in 2004, General Motors quietly retired the brand, ending its century-long presence without fanfare, a slow fade rather than a dramatic crash. Advertising in the 70s also shaped childhoods in unexpected ways. Saturday morning cartoons were accompanied by sugary cereal ads, featuring mascots like Tony the Tiger or Toucan Sam. Colorful, noisy, and impossible to ignore, these commercials sold mountains of sugar to children under the guise of fun and nutrition. Parents barely noticed as children begged for boxes of these cereals, while nutritionists raised alarms. Eventually, regulations limited such advertising during children's programming. Mascots remained, but the aggressive sugar pushing disappeared. Even toys reflected a mix of thrill and danger. Lawn darts, known as jarts, were meant to be fun backyard games, but their heavy metal tips caused injuries and fatalities. Schools and parents warned of the dangers, and by the late 1980s, they were banned. What was once innocent play now seems absurdly reckless. The 70s were a decade of bold trends, both cultural and commercial. Cars, cartoons, and toys were all part of a world that celebrated freedom and fun, often ignoring consequences. Today, the remnants of these trends serve as reminders of an era that was daring, colorful, and sometimes dangerously carefree. The 1970s were full of trends that seemed harmless at first glance, but some of them revealed just how different societal norms were back then. Take the example of high karate aftershave. Marketed to teenage boys, this aftershave was a mix of humor and daring masculinity. The commercials were over the top, showing boys spraying it and supposedly attracting attention from girls. It was absurd, exaggerated, and funny, yet it became a cultural phenomenon. Teenagers proudly wore it, imitating the commercials, while adults saw it as a playful ritual of adolescence. The product itself had a surprisingly pleasant scent, but the charm was in the spectacle, the promise of confidence and rebellion in a small bottle. Then there were mixtapes, handmade, handwritten, and carefully curated. Unlike today's playlists, mixtapes were physical, requiring patience, skill, and an emotional touch. You spent hours recording songs from the radio, ensuring each track flowed perfectly into the next. The cassette case became a canvas, decorated, labeled, and given to a crush, a friend, or simply kept as a personal treasure. A good mixtape was an art form, a message, a memory, and a declaration of feeling all in one. Unlike anything today, it carried effort, intimacy, and patience, a tangible connection. Another relic of the decade was show-and-tell technology. Personal film and audio projectors allowed children to bring small, magical cinematic experiences into their own homes. You could watch films paired with records, creating immersive storytelling that felt like a window to the future. The bulky, clunky devices were primitive by modern standards, yet mesmerizing for kids. They turned ordinary afternoons into adventures, fostering imagination and wonder, and made storytelling a personal, unforgettable experience. Finally, beaded door curtains transformed rooms into sensory experiences. Walking through one, the beads clinked, creating an ambient soundtrack. They separated spaces, marked entrances, and added color and texture. Though simple, these curtains became a symbol of individuality, playfulness, and rebellion against standard home decor. The 70s were a world of vibrant creativity, audacious style, and a hint of chaos. A decade where everyday objects were infused with personality, excitement, and sometimes danger. The 1970s were a playground of odd rules and quirky laws that seem almost unbelievable today. Take feeding pigeons in the city. On a sunny afternoon, you might think tossing breadcrumbs to a flock was harmless fun. But in some American cities, feeding pigeons was illegal. Authorities were battling an overpopulation problem. Pigeons produced mountains of droppings, damaged buildings, and were potential carriers of disease. By limiting their food source, cities hoped to control the flocks and protect public health. Children's playful gestures were suddenly subject to serious fines, turning a simple act of kindness into a legal concern. Then there were the silly string bands. These harmless, colorful sprays of plastic string could cover streets, trees, cars, and public property in minutes. Festivals and parades became chaotic landscapes of sticky messes. Cleanup was laborious, costly, and frustrating. Local governments intervened, forbidding the playful sprays in public spaces to maintain order and prevent property damage. What felt like carefree fun quickly collided with practical concerns, showing how freedom had boundaries. Even roller skating in public restrooms was a problem. The craze of wheeled freedom collided with slippery tiles and confined spaces, making accidents almost inevitable. Cities banned skates in restrooms to prevent injuries, turning even casual fun into regulated behavior. Some laws were downright peculiar, like carrying an ice cream cone in your pocket. This odd restriction existed in a few states because horses could be attracted to the sweet treat, creating unexpected chaos on the streets. What seemed innocent was suddenly a matter of public safety, showing how creative legislation could be in anticipating risks. The 70s were a decade where fun and danger often walked side by side. Innocent activities carried hidden risks, and laws reflected a mix of practicality, humor, and the limits of societal tolerance. What seems absurd today was once the rule of the land, and remembering these laws is a testament to a time when life was both freer and stranger. The 1970s were a strange, wild, and wonderfully unpredictable time. Toys that could injure, fashions that shocked, and laws that now seem absurd all painted a world where freedom had its edges, and sometimes those edges were sharp. Looking back, it's easy to laugh, but also to marvel at how society has changed, reshaping fun, safety, and what we consider acceptable. These memories aren't just curiosities. They're a glimpse into a culture that balanced thrill with risk in ways we'll never forget. Share your favorite 70s story in the comments, and let's keep these fascinating memories alive together.